Pam Bondi just exposed something huge, something Judge James Boasberg never wanted the world to see, a hidden scandal so explosive it could shake the entire justice system, suppressed evidence, secret deals, and a cover-up that goes deeper than anyone imagined. The real question is, how far does this corruption go, and who else is involved? Because once you hear what Bondi uncovered, you'll never trust the courts the same way again. This case is about to explode. Pam Bondi had seen her fair share of legal battles. But this wasn't just another case. It was a ticking time bomb. Months ago, whispers about Signalgate started circulating, an alleged secret communication system used by high-ranking officials to hide sensitive information. At first, it seemed like just another conspiracy theory, until one day, a whistleblower, a former clerk in the D.C. courts, came forward with something explosive. He claimed that Judge James Boasberg, a highly influential federal judge, had intentionally suppressed key evidence that could have exposed government misconduct. But why? And more importantly, who else was involved? This wasn't just about one corrupt judge. If true, it meant the very integrity of the judicial system was at risk. Pam Bondi, known for her fearless approach to the law, decided to dig deeper. And what she found? It was worse than anyone imagined. To understand the weight of this scandal, you need to know who Judge James Boasberg really is. He wasn't just any judge. He was the chief judge of the FISA court, the secretive court responsible for approving surveillance warrants on high-profile cases, including government officials and even journalists. He had a history of overseeing politically sensitive cases, often making rulings that conveniently shielded powerful figures. He was also a longtime D.C. insider, with deep connections to legal and political circles that ensured his decisions were rarely questioned. For years, Boasberg had the reputation of being a protector of the system. But what if he wasn't protecting justice? What if he was protecting himself and his allies? Bondi's investigation uncovered a shocking pattern. Several key cases under Boasberg's jurisdiction had mysteriously missing evidence. Documents that could have exposed government overreach suddenly vanished. Whistleblowers who tried to speak up, silenced, discredited, or mysteriously transferred to different departments. And the most damning part, there was direct proof that Boasberg had knowledge of these incidents, yet did nothing. This wasn't incompetence. This was deliberate obstruction. Bondi was about to close her files on the case until she got a late-night call from an anonymous source. The voice on the other end whispered, "You're looking in the right place, Pam, but you're not thinking big enough. Boasberg wasn't just covering up. He was part of it." That's when she realized this wasn't just about a cover-up. This was about who Judge Boasberg was protecting, and that's when the case truly exploded. The moment everything shifts. Until now, the allegations against Judge Boasberg had been whispered in hushed tones, speculated on in circles that dared to question the system. But what Pam Bondi just uncovered, it wasn't just another piece of the puzzle. It was the entire picture, in high resolution, undeniable, and damning. A confidential document lands in her hands, one that was never meant to see the light of day. At first glance, it looks like just another memo, but as she reads further, her pulse quickens. The letter is signed by a high-ranking official, someone with direct connections to Boasberg. The content? A directive to neutralize any legal obstacles to the suppression of classified evidence in the ongoing investigation. And the signature at the bottom? Someone with everything to lose if this goes public. Pam doesn't stop there. She cross-checks dates, timestamps, and case files. The threads start to connect, forming a disturbing picture. Case after case, Boasberg had been presiding over rulings that conveniently benefited a particular group of insiders, individuals tied to the very agencies he was meant to hold accountable. His pattern of suppressing critical evidence, dismissing crucial testimonies, and sealing cases under the pretense of national security wasn't random. It was deliberate, calculated, and systematic. Then comes the real bombshell. A whistleblower steps forward. He had worked closely with Boasberg, compiling reports, redacting sensitive information before court submissions. But he saw something he wasn't supposed to. Internal communications, heavily encrypted, detailing which evidence should be hidden from public records and why. The messages were chillingly specific. Ensure all digital correspondences tied to redacted are inaccessible for future judicial review. In other words, an order to erase and rewrite history. Pam Bondi knew this was bigger than one corrupt judge. This was an entire system designed to protect itself at the cost of truth and justice. But if she was going to expose this, She needed the world to see it in a way they couldn't ignore. Media leaks had been ineffective before. Headlines would flash, but the system had a way of burying the truth beneath bureaucratic jargon and technical legalese. This time, she needed a different strategy. She reaches out to key figures in law enforcement, individuals who had also grown disillusioned with the cracks in the system. If she could get them to publicly acknowledge what was happening, the weight of their credibility could turn this from a mere scandal into an unstoppable force. Then, the unexpected happens. The whistleblower vanishes. His home cleared out overnight. His phone disconnected. It was a clear message: stop now or face the consequences. But Pam Bondi isn't someone who backs down. She pivots. She goes live. A recorded statement, backed with scanned copies of the memo, key excerpts from the encrypted communications, and a direct call to action. She names names. She exposes the links between Boasberg, government officials, and the very institutions meant to safeguard justice. The internet erupts. Hashtags trend worldwide. People who had long suspected corruption in high places now had evidence they could see, read, and share. The system was designed to silence opposition, but it had never encountered someone like Pam Bondi, who understood how to weaponize the truth. As expected, Boasberg's legal team goes into immediate damage control. Statements flood the media, baseless accusations, politically motivated attacks, misinterpretation of legal procedures. But it's too late. The truth is out. And now, the system is scrambling, not just to protect Boasberg, but to stop the entire foundation from crumbling. The pressure mounts. Congressional inquiries are launched. Independent investigators demand access to sealed court records. The Department of Justice is forced to comment publicly. And behind closed doors, panic calls between high-ranking officials intensify. The problem isn't just Boasberg anymore. It's who else gets exposed if he falls. Pam Bondi watches it unfold. She knows this is just the beginning, and she knows the most dangerous part is yet to come. The real fight isn't about proving the scandal is real. It's about what happens when the people in power realize they can't contain it anymore. The moment the scandal broke, the legal and political battlefield erupted into chaos, sending shockwaves through Washington and beyond. Pam Bondi, the former Florida Attorney General turned relentless investigator, had pulled the trigger on a bombshell revelation, one that would ignite a firestorm no one could contain. Judge James Boasberg, a respected federal jurist with deep ties to the political elite, was now at the center of a scandal that threatened to unravel not just his career, but the very integrity of the judiciary. Bondi had spent months meticulously assembling her case, working with whistleblowers, digging through sealed court records, and verifying sources. She knew the risks. Going after a sitting federal judge was a dangerous game, especially one as well-connected as Boasberg. But she also knew that if the allegations were true, the consequences of silence would be far worse. Boasberg wasn't going down without a fight. Within hours of the scandal breaking, his high-powered legal team, led by renowned defense attorney Robert Latham, launched a counter-offensive. Press releases, televised interviews, and carefully worded legal filings flooded the media, all with the same message. This was a political hit job. These allegations are baseless. A coordinated smear campaign designed to undermine the judiciary, Latham declared in a fiery press conference. The so-called evidence has been grossly misinterpreted, selectively leaked, and maliciously taken out of context. The strategy was clear: attack the credibility of Bondi's sources, sow doubt in the public's mind, and paint the investigation as a partisan witch hunt. Boasberg's allies in the legal world quickly rallied to his defense. Respected legal analysts appeared on cable news, arguing that judicial independence was under attack. If a judge could be brought down by unverified leaks, what did that mean for the rule of law? Behind the scenes, the political fallout was immediate and explosive. In the halls of Congress, lawmakers were scrambling, some to distance themselves from Boasberg, others to protect him. Senator Mark Rinaldi, a longtime ally of the judge, was among the first to publicly defend him. Judge Boasberg has served this country with distinction for decades, Rinaldi said in a statement. We cannot allow unsubstantiated allegations to destroy a man's reputation overnight, but not everyone was so steadfast. Congresswoman Elise Chen, a rising star in the progressive wing, called for an immediate ethics investigation. If there's even a hint of judicial misconduct, we have a duty to uncover the truth, she said. No one is above the law, not even a federal judge. The media frenzy only intensified. Late-night talk shows dissected every angle of the scandal, while podcasts and op-eds debated whether this was a legitimate reckoning or a politically motivated takedown. Social media erupted into a battleground, with hashtags like Boasberg resign and Bade trust the judiciary trending nationwide. As the investigation gained momentum, Bondi found herself in the crosshairs. Opponents dredged up past controversies from her career, her handling of high-profile cases, her political affiliations, even old ethics complaints. The attacks were relentless, designed to undermine her credibility. Pam Bondi isn't some noble crusader for justice, sneered political commentator Derek Volek on a primetime news panel. She's a partisan operative with an axe to grind. This entire investigation reeks of opportunism, but Bondi refused to back down. She called a press conference, standing firm amid the storm of cameras and shouted questions. "This isn't about me," she declared, her voice steady. "This is about a judge who believed he was untouchable. It's about a system that protects its own instead of the people it serves. And it's about whether we, as a nation, will tolerate corruption or demand accountability." Her words struck a chord. The crowd erupted in applause, and within hours, public sentiment began to shift. Grassroots organizations mobilized, demanding transparency. Protesters gathered outside courthouses, holding signs that read, "Justice for sale," and "A Boasberg must go." Behind closed doors, Boasberg was feeling the heat. His usual allies, once quick to return his calls, were suddenly unavailable. His legal team was fracturing under the pressure. Some advisors urged him to fight to the bitter end. Others whispered that a quiet resignation might be the only way to salvage what was left of his reputation. But Boasberg was stubborn. He had spent decades climbing the ranks of the legal world, earning respect, wielding influence. He wouldn't let it all crumble over what he called a media-fueled farce. Then came the leaks. New documents surfaced, emails, internal memos, damning correspondence that directly contradicted Boasberg's public denials. The evidence showed more than just ethical lapses. It revealed a deliberate effort to suppress critical information in multiple high-profile cases. This wasn't just misconduct, it was obstruction of justice. The pressure became unbearable. Congressional leaders, once hesitant, now demanded hearings. The Department of Justice, initially silent, opened a preliminary review. Even some of Boasberg's staunchest defenders began to waver. Just as Boasberg prepared to testify before Congress, hoping to salvage his legacy, an unexpected bombshell dropped. A source from within his inner circle, someone who had remained loyal until now, came forward with explosive new testimony. The insider revealed that Boasberg had knowingly manipulated case outcomes to favor powerful interests, that he had privately bragged about his ability to control the game. The testimony was detailed, corroborated by documents, and impossible to ignore. The walls were closing in. The question was no longer if Boasberg would fall, but how far and who he would take down with him. As the scandal reached its climax, one thing became clear. Pam Bondi had started a fire that would burn far beyond a single judge. This was about power, corruption, and a system that had operated in the shadows for too long. And the American people were watching. The courtroom was packed. The air was thick with anticipation, the tension palpable. On one side, Pam Bondi sat with her legal team, exuding the confidence of a woman who had uncovered something monumental. On the other, Judge James Boasberg, a man who had spent years wielding immense power from behind the bench, now found himself on the other side of justice. Cameras outside captured the chaos, as reporters scrambled to piece together the explosive revelations that had led to this moment. As the judge presiding over the hearing entered, the murmurs died down. The prosecution wasted no time. "Your Honor, we present irrefutable evidence that Judge Boasberg knowingly suppressed key information in the Signalgate scandal, obstructing justice at the highest level. We have emails, encrypted messages, and testimony from insiders who were coerced into silence." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Boasberg's defense attorney shot up. "Objection. This is a blatant attack on judicial independence. My client acted within the legal framework, ensuring national security and the integrity of the judicial process." Pam Bondi rose, her voice unwavering. "With all due respect, national security is not a shield for corruption. If it were, then every act of misconduct could be hidden under that excuse. We have proof that Judge Boasberg actively participated in concealing key evidence that would have exposed deep-rooted misconduct within the system. And let's not forget, the people deserve the truth." The judge leaned forward. Ms. Bondi, you claim to have evidence that implicates Judge Boasberg directly. Present it. Bondi nodded. The courtroom held its collective breath as her team played an audio recording, one that had been leaked from a private, off-the-record conversation. The voice was unmistakable. Boasberg's. If this gets out, we lose control. We keep it buried. No documents, no records, nothing that can be traced back. Understood? A collective gasp. Boasberg's face went pale. His attorneys whispered furiously among themselves. Reporters outside relayed the breaking news. A sitting judge caught on tape discussing evidence suppression. Boasberg's lawyer stood. This tape is illegally obtained and should be inadmissible, Pam Bondi fired back. It was provided by a whistleblower under federal protection. Every step was taken to ensure its authenticity. And let's talk about legality. Was it legal when Judge Boasberg erased digital records? Was it legal when he used his position to shield certain individuals from prosecution? The courtroom erupted in whispers. The presiding judge called for order. Enough. The evidence is compelling. We will proceed. Over the next several hours, Bondi's team meticulously laid out the case. The deleted emails, the missing court records, the timeline that conveniently absolved key players, and now, this audio recording. Piece by piece, they built an unshakable narrative. The defense struggled. Boasberg's attorney attempted to discredit the whistleblower, claiming personal vendettas and tampered evidence. But the more they fought, the weaker their argument seemed. Then came the moment that sealed Boasberg's fate. A surprise witness, a former aide who had worked closely with Boasberg for years, took the stand. Nervous but resolute, she faced the courtroom. I was ordered to delete files. I was told to ensure that no trace remained. I was scared, but I can't be silent anymore. Boasberg's attorney objected, but the judge overruled. The witness continued, detailing how she had personally been instructed to alter official records. She produced a flash drive. This contains backups of the files I was supposed to erase. I knew this day would come. The room was stunned into silence. The presiding judge leaned back, absorbing the gravity of the moment. Outside, social media exploded. Hashtags like Boasberg resign and Justice for the People trended worldwide. News anchors struggled to keep up with the developments. The story had officially outgrown the courtroom. It was now a national crisis. As the hearing neared its conclusion, Boasberg himself finally took the stand. He was visibly shaken, but maintained his composure. I did what I believed was necessary to protect the system, not for personal gain, but for stability. Sometimes sacrifices must be made. Pam Bondi didn't miss a beat. Who decides those sacrifices, Judge Boasberg? You? In a democracy, that power belongs to the people. And today, they demand accountability. The prosecution rested. The judge announced that a ruling would be delivered soon. Outside, Pam Bondi faced the press. This is not about one man. This is about a culture of unchecked power. Today, we took a step toward justice, but this fight isn't over. As the crowd cheered and the cameras flashed, one thing was clear. The system had been shaken to its core, and the repercussions were just beginning. The courtroom was silent. Every eye was on the judge as he prepared to deliver his verdict. This wasn't just about Boasberg anymore. This was about the integrity of the entire system. The media had dissected every detail. The public had made up its mind, and now the legal world held its breath. Pam Bondi sat poised, unflinching, knowing she had done everything in her power to expose the truth. Across the aisle, Boasberg looked like a man who had aged a decade in a matter of weeks. The weight of accountability was finally pressing down on him. His normally confident demeanor had faded, replaced by a look of sheer exhaustion. He adjusted his tie with shaking hands, his lips pressed into a thin line as the judge cleared his throat. After reviewing the evidence, testimonies, and the clear obstruction of justice, this court finds Judge James Boasberg guilty of misconduct and judicial malpractice. The words echoed through the chamber like a thunderclap. Gasps filled the room. A murmur rippled through the courtroom, an amalgamation of shock, triumph, and disbelief. Boasberg's attorneys immediately rose, ready to challenge, but the damage had been done. His once impenetrable fortress had crumbled. He looked around as if searching for an escape, but there was none. Social media erupted. Hashtags like "Oh, Boasberg guilty" and "Justice prevails" dominated timelines. News outlets dissected every moment of the trial, replaying Bondi's most damning arguments over and over. The public, once divided, now had a clear villain. Late-night talk shows ridiculed Boasberg's downfall, and political commentators debated whether this marked the beginning of widespread judicial reform. But Bondi wasn't done yet. Outside the courtroom, Facing a sea of reporters, she didn't gloat. The flashing cameras, the shouted questions, all of it blurred into the background as she stepped to the podium. This was never about one man, she said firmly. This was about the cracks in a system that allowed corruption to thrive. Today, one judge is held accountable. Tomorrow, we continue the fight. Her words carried weight beyond the microphones. They resonated with people who had lost faith in the judicial system, with those who had suffered under the weight of biased rulings and backdoor deals. A single verdict wasn't enough to fix a broken system, but it was a start. The repercussions were swift. Government agencies launched internal reviews. Whistleblowers came forward with new claims against other judges. The judiciary, long considered untouchable, was now under scrutiny like never before. Lawmakers debated judicial oversight reforms, proposing new measures to prevent unchecked power. The domino effect had begun. Boasberg, now disbarred and disgraced, tried to mount a public defense. He gave interviews, blaming political bias, claiming he was a scapegoat. He appeared on news panels, shaking his head in disbelief as he decried the so-called witch hunt against him. He painted himself as a victim, insisting that he had only ever acted within the bounds of the law. But the public had seen the evidence. They weren't buying it. A documentary detailing the case was in the works. Investigative journalists were digging deeper, uncovering connections between Boasberg and shadowy political figures who had once shielded him from scrutiny. It turned out this was only the tip of the iceberg. Months later, Bondi addressed a group of young law students. The grand lecture hall was packed, students hanging on to her every word. "Power is a responsibility," she told them, "and those who abuse it must always, always be held accountable." Her words weren't just advice. They were a challenge, a call to action. One student raised a hand. "Ms. Bondi, do you think this case will actually change anything? Or will people just forget in a few months?" Bondi let the question hang in the air for a moment before answering. "That depends on all of us. If we allow ourselves to become numb to corruption, then yes, things will go back to the way they were. But if we stay vigilant, if we demand accountability, then change is inevitable." As she walked off the stage, her phone buzzed. Another case, another injustice waiting to be exposed. She glanced at the message and shook her head with a knowing smile. The fight wasn't over. It was just getting started. And for those still trying to manipulate the system, they had one thing to worry about. Pam Bondi was watching. As Pam Bondi walked away from the courthouse, the weight of the moment settled in. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. She had taken on a sitting judge and proven that even those in the highest positions of power could be held accountable. But what about the ones still hiding in the shadows? The media frenzy surrounding the trial had ignited a firestorm of conversations. News anchors debated what this meant for the judicial system, while legal experts speculated on what reforms might follow. Some saw Bondi as a hero, others called her a disruptor, but no one could deny that she had shaken the foundations of a system that had long operated in secrecy. At home, Bondi poured herself a cup of coffee and scrolled through the flood of messages on her phone. Supporters hailed her as a champion of justice. Critics accused her of grandstanding. And then there were the anonymous tips, whispers of other judges, other officials, other cases where justice had been manipulated. She took a deep breath. This was just the beginning. In Washington, lawmakers found themselves under pressure to act. The public demanded greater oversight of the judiciary. Petitions circulated, calling for transparency in judicial rulings and harsher penalties for those who abused their power. Some politicians, sensing the changing tides, quickly aligned themselves with the movement, while others scrambled to protect their own interests. Boasberg, now disgraced, attempted to rehabilitate his image. He appeared on a prime-time interview, claiming he had been unfairly targeted. This was a political witch hunt, he insisted, but the evidence spoke louder than his words. Every lie, every deception had been laid bare. The public wasn't listening. Meanwhile, Bondi made a surprise visit to a university law class. The students sat in rapt attention as she spoke. "Power isn't inherently good or bad," she told them. "It's what you do with it that defines you. If you see corruption and look the other way, you're just as guilty as the person committing it." A student raised a hand. "What's next for you?" She smiled. "There's always another fight." The final scene. Bondi walks out of the classroom, her phone buzzing with another lead, another case, another injustice waiting to be exposed. And as the screen fades to black, the audience is left with one powerful thought. Justice isn't automatic. It happens when people demand it. So the question is, what are you going to do about it?